Your Honor, I have video proof of Christian McCormick scamming people using a white girl, real nice body, and talking to guys in the DC area to get their money.
Ces institutions-là sont faites pour transmettre les ordres, les faire appliquer et punir les gens qui n'obéissent pas.
So what's your sentence for her?
Electric chair.
Oh shit! God damn it!
Another room tone. Room tonic. Ooh, I'm in the light. Am I in the light, ho? I'm in the light. Let's get into divorce court. Here's a clip from 1987, the early period, wherein one member of a crumbling rodeo couple is cross-examined as to the reasons for his divorce.
I could perform anything for that woman if she'd just treat me right, instead of acting like Annie Oakley.
Mr. O'Connor, weren't you present when the police raided the Rawhide Bar in Denver, a notorious meeting place for homosexuals?
Wait a minute. 3 o'clock in the morning, I thought it was just an ordinary bar.
An ordinary bar? Would you describe as ordinary a bar with male go-go dancers in nothing but athletic supporters?
Now, Your Honor, I'm going to object to the line of questioning. This is irrelevant.
I agree. Let's get on to another subject matter.
Here's another from the classical period, the late 90s, wherein the judge, now absent any legal counsel, confirms the charges for the following divorce.
This marriage is ending because, according to you, Mr. Kelly, your wife is just a little too boyish for you.
That's right. She cusses like a sailor, she sits like a man, she burps and belches all out in public like a man. I'm just sick of my wife.
And here's a third from the late period, around 2020, wherein a surprise witness, rather disappointingly, articulates the reasons why one member of an unmarried couple should not be legally compelled to pay back rent.
I don't like how he treat him.
Tell me, give me a story, something I would say.
First of all, he acts like a whole housewife. He cooks all your food.
Her reasoning, if it was hard for you to hear over the fracas, is that he's treated like a whole housewife. Hashtag wages for housework. So somewhere between the firm fatherly reason of 1987 and the shrill disbelief of 2020, divorce court has gone through some dramatic shifts. I mean, the shit was tectonic. And it's not just divorce court.
I plead the fifth.
The whole genre de-emphasized any legal references for common sense, traded in its stern stewards of justice for game show personality, and any legal evidence gathering increasingly gave way to absurd stories of petty deceit.
I went to Christian's family member's barbecue, and a secret went out that Vonnie and Ray had sex with one of his family members, and it was confirmed.
At the same time?
But some things haven't changed. It's notable that these three cherry-picked scenes have at their core a certain concern for properly performed gender roles. Not assertions of infidelity, but accusations referencing Annie Oakley. And despite the 1987 lawyer's claim of irrelevance, homosexuality itself continues to be a central part of the proceedings.
Man, don't roll your eyes like you are a woman. You're a man, stand up straight. I don't know, a lot of folk are down low these days.
Ooh.
In this next series of videos, we'll investigate those changes, those constants, and their relationship to the architecture of 18th century salt mines. But before that, a quick history.
These are the plaintiffs Valerie and Anthony Sines. Valerie claims she was sitting on the front steps of her condo with her cat Scampy and a friend when the defendant came jogging by with his unleashed dog. He came over to greet her friend, and that's when his dog went after Scampy, injuring her. They're suing for $169.50 for vet bills. This is the defendant, Todd Euler. He says he was jogging down the road, minding his own business, when the plaintiff's friend insisted he come over to say hello. The plaintiff's cat suddenly hissed and clawed at his dog Samantha, and the two of them took off into another yard. He's accused of failing to control his dog.
In 1981, the People's Court debuted, with retired LA County Court Judge Joseph A. Wapner presiding. In the space of a single episode, Wapner's elderly, soft-spoken demeanor brought multiple small-claim civil court cases to a matter-of-fact resolution.
There's just no excuse for what you did. Judgment for plaintiff for $169.50.
This established court trials as a genre of syndicated television. On its heels came divorce court. With the added flair of surprise witnesses, divorce court was presided over by the equally elderly, though somewhat more zesty, Judge William Keene.
Divorce court is a dramatization based on cases and issues raised in the family courts of this nation.
While the cases were real, the events on screen were spirited reenactments.
Look, I lost my chance at that money once. I was trying to get it back. Now I don't give a damn. Go ahead. Stick it to him.
This kept everyone's privacy intact, and professional actors allowed for more controlled dramatics.
He slammed me alongside the face and said I was some kind of sex kook.
In this first wave, parties can be seen wrestling with legitimate legal complexities.
Sir?
Yes?
Does the leash law hold true on private property where I was invited?
You still have to control your dog. If it's your private property, that's another story.
And while publicly embarrassing your ex has its own allure, not all dirty laundry is legally relevant.
You were in there bumping uglies with Mad, not my father.
Keeping this mischief in check, early divorce court provided legal aid.
Your Honor, I move to strike that speculation.
All right, bumping uglies goes out.
And never wallowing in the muck, the ever-honorable justices routinely ended episodes with an overarching moral message.
When this marriage came out of the chute, so to speak, I think it had two people who loved the rodeo, and the cinch rope of a marriage is communication. And when that cinch rope breaks, then that marriage has about as much chance for success as a bronco rider riding side saddle.
This was the era of real talk from real Americans, where journalistically inclined men like Geraldo Rivera and Phil Donahue amplified the voices of the common folk, featuring heavy-hitting issues such as the interpersonal aspects of structural racism.
I get sick and tired of seeing Uncle Tom here sucking up, trying to be a white
Go ahead, Roy, go ahead.
And in 1988, on set of one such racially motivated episode, Geraldo had his nose broken.
You gotta be kidding. You gotta be kidding. You gotta be kidding. Hey, hold it. Hold it. Sit down.
The ratings went through the roof. I hope you brought your galoshes, because from here on out, it's all gonna be muck. Get ready to wallow.
We'll return for the case of A Taste of Scampi after these messages.
I've been going for a minute, now I'm back with the jump off.
Welcome to Driptomania, where I make my way unguided and ill-informed through art history, visual culture, and critical theory. I understand I've been going for a minute. You see, last spring I had a slight, a tiny convulsion of a tiny blood vessel. Now, but for real,
I was captured in Cambodia while cavorting with a Cambodian.
Now, but for real, I was just broke and depressed and saddled with a crisis of confidence. But now that the demons have been scared away,
now I'm back.
An overall analysis of tabloid television. To avoid a repeat offense, you can support me here, and financially here. Also, Michel Foucault can suck my fucking dick for writing like that. But last time we were here, Stuart Hall's Encoding, Decoding in the Television Discourse helped us understand television, its audiences, and their relationship to institutional power. There was also some discussion of Maury's phobia episodes, and one video where I may have done too much in analyzing a 30-second Judge Judy promo. But it was fierce though. In this second volume of the tabloid television cycle, a few philosophers will help us through the development of the Judge Show, make sense of its changes, and more specifically, the things that stay the same. But before that, back to the lesson.
I get sick and tired of seeing Uncle Tom here sucking up, trying to be a white
Go ahead, Roy, go ahead.
Now, let me tell you.
Sex. Jumping out the Jaguar with the Timbers. Keep your head up and let's move. These folks, let's go worldwide.
Following the great American rhinoplasty of '88, production companies scrambled to produce similar talk TV. And in 1991, Multimedia Entertainment was planning its own issues-oriented Donahue derivative.
I'm 11 years old. I'm 12 years old. And I'm 14. We believe that blacks are not equal to whites, and when the time comes, God will demand us to kill all Jews.
Fresh off his tenure as mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio, Jerry Springer seemed a shoo-in for the host.
Listen to what you just heard. These are vile words that did not come out of the mouth of some middle-aged bigot. They came out of the mouth of a child. And so the question now is, how do we deal with it? Because we do have to deal with it. One day, these kids are going to grow up.
But Geraldo's nose had changed everything. Integrity and journalistic prestige were no longer in vogue. Not even a panel of racist children could save the show.
Well, I thought we'd do something different here today. Today, our audience is comprised almost exclusively of kids their own age. Kids talking to kids about racism.
It was canceled after one season. It seems that respectable reenactment too was out of fashion, because just 2 years later, both the People's Court and Divorce Court were canceled.
Electric chair.
But in 1994, another network gives Jerry new life, and an even newer ethos.
And when Universal bought us, they said, from now on, only crazy.
An ethos that introduced the scandalous, the salacious, the unyielding violence that became hallmark of a new genre, tabloid television. Personality was in, Jerry dropped the Journalist Act and begins actively antagonizing the audience.
My question's for the hillbilly in the green flannel.
And it's here we begin with the bodyguards. In 1996, clearly chasing ratings, the genre's mixed. Even-handed Judge Wapner was replaced by Brooklyn-born brass tacks Judith Sheindlin.
Was I respectful to you, sir?
Yes.
I expect you to be respectful to me.
Rather than neutrally evaluating the facts of the case, the judge became more of a participant observer. The authority of the court became cruel, and litigants suffered less from a lack of legal know-how as they did a lack of common sense.
A moron!
No more reenactments. This new show is live and very much in color. Real people, real cases, with real-time feedback from a real judge who's real pissed off.
And you still don't even get it.
And in her wake, the People's Court and Divorce Court were both revived, given new life, a new attitude.
A new style, a new hairdo, a new cut, a new color.
But in the case of Divorce Court, the lawyers were never resurrected. But the bailiff is given a whole new role as carceral reminder and comic relief.
Oh, that's true. Ask him, he's been married for how long?
Over 20-some years.
Over 20
Look at him though, he look mad.
If you squint, you can almost see Steve Wilkos.
That is it. You talk to the judges period. Understood? I will take you out. No problem.
And now, in the age of social media, where broadcasting companies cannibalize to maintain a dying grip on a once captive audience, the genres have fully converged.
Ladies, why are we here?
With nostalgia its greatest asset, the shallow gene pool that once cradled Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, and Steve Harvey has unleashed a pandemonium of incoherent premises. Paternity Court.
Oh, and so you found yourself a nice little sugar daddy, little older man that was gonna do for you and your son. Mm-hmm.
Jerry's Justice.
Oh, Becky with the good hair.
And Judge Steve Harvey.
That's funny. I like that right there.
But the girls would rather learn about Amber Heard on TikTok. These monstrous births cling to life on games of personality, comedic cross-examination, and justice meted out through Steve Harvey's indestructible veneers.
She said she pleaded the fifth.
What was once the people's justice is now Jerry's Justice, a complex intellectual property owned part Jerry Springer and part National Broadcasting Company. Correction, NBC Universal since the 2004 merger. And the producers who once scoured the small claims docket now add social media to their dossiers, giving us the undeniable, the eternal, the ceaseless jubilation of...
You know what? It's given very much of how you doing your honor, Miss Judge Lance Holler.
In Paternity Court, correctly raising a child is less a social or legal concern, and more so a spectacle of incongruously permuted genetic material.
I had on booty shorts and everything, so he looked me up and down. He was like, ooh, you thick.
But you told me you was on birth control.
The legality of these shows is debatable. Respect for the court is a matter of contract, and I'm not sure anyone is a legitimate judge. Brett Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court. So, from losing legal representation to the aggressive and vengeful sovereignty of Judge Judy to paternity tests becoming the center of their own court shows, we can see that these shows are part of a larger social and industrial ecosystem. These court TV plate tectonics reveal a tension between the disciplinary forces of the court and the theatrical forces of the free market. That surprises no one. What is surprising, though, is that they stray so far from any legal officialdom.
You must think this is real court.
If, over the span of a few decades, court shows can so completely divest themselves from the law, it begs the question, what are these shows really about? Discipline. Discipline of the ridiculous.
Sex kook.
Discipline of the unruly.
I'm not paying him rent money.
Discipline of the spectacularly unrepentant underclasses.
Oh,
But,
come on, cuz. You got me.
Well,
How you
then
gonna
act
come
like-
at me like that, Judge? Not
But you're not acting
disrespectful on
like a
TV,
man.
though, man. You not acting like a man by coming at me like that.
What hasn't changed is the fundamental authority of the court and the incredible ignorance split between plaintiff and defendant.
You can't plead the fifth after you told the story.
Here, legal judgment is mere background for a disciplinary performance running along class, racial, and sexual lines. Because in these shows, while the law may altogether disappear, society must be defended.
Unruly tenant. and an unfit mother?
In this video, we're going to get a lay of the land. We'll review the faults and fissures split between the disciplinary power of public spectacle.
Mr. Charles, when was the last time that you were intimate with Ms. Jackson?
And the punishing power of the court.
This morning.
At the power which discards stenographers and investigates irrelevant indiscretions.
Why are we here?
A power that's always been present, and how, withstanding so many twists, turns, flips, and even more flops, what about that power places the underclasses so squarely at the center, steady standing there, stuck on stupid?
Miss Jackson. Miss Jackson?
And when I say always, I mean way before 1981. So, as ever, let's get in to the 18th century. You ready, bitch? On January 5th, 1757, Robert Damiens, a 42-year-old former French soldier, rushed up to Louis XV with a knife and inflicted a light wound. Damiens claimed to have only been trying to scare the king, but his crime was ruled an attempted regicide. I mean, bitch, you don't just roll up on royalty with a blade and be like, I was just playing. But I digress. The execution was public, with a large crowd attending, and spectacularly brutal. It was crazy, where on a scaffold that will be erected there, the flesh will be torn from his breasts, arms, thighs, and calves with red-hot pincers, and poured molten lead, boiling oil, burning resin, wax, and sulfur melted together, and then his body drawn and quartered by 4 horses, and his limbs and body consumed by fire, reduced to ashes, and his ashes thrown to the winds. This is the opening of Discipline and Punish, written by philosopher Michel Foucault, a man who answers the question, what if Uncle Fester spoke French? After being tortured to his final and public confession, Damiens was drawn and quartered. The horses tied to each of his limbs were tired of something, so they didn't have the required force to pull apart his limbs. It was crazy. The horses tugged hard, each pulling straight on a limb, each horse held by the executioner. Finally, after several attempts, the direction of the horses had to be changed. This was repeated several times. So crazy, they had to bring in more horses. 2 more horses had to be added to those harnessed to the thighs, which made 6 horses in all, without success. An executioner had to be brought in to finish the job. It was crazy. Without stopping to comment on the horrifying text, Foucault abruptly switches to another document from 1837, which states the rules for a detention center for young offenders in Paris. Article 17. The prisoner's day will begin at 6 in the morning in winter and 5 in summer. They will work for 9 hours a day throughout the year. 2 hours a day will be devoted to instruction. Article 18. Rising. At the first drum roll, the prisoner must rise and dress in silence. At the second drum roll, they must be dressed and make their beds. At the third, they must line up and proceed to the chapel for morning prayer. There is a 5-minute interval between each drum roll. After citing this and 9 similar rules regarding prayer, work, and education, Foucault finally ventures a comment. We have then a public execution and a timetable. This comparison is central to Foucault's text. What changed the form of French punishment from violent torture to such a minute control of the convicted? What does such a change show about the society that produced it? And for us, what, if anything, can this tell us about televised jurisprudence?
You people have to learn how to behave yourselves in the court.
Now, Foucault is notoriously difficult to read, and even more difficult to understand. It's taken me 9 months to even get here. Perhaps more notorious is the questionable application of his work to various unrelated phenomena. Unfortunately, I will be committing today that exact offense, though I will try to shoehorn in as many direct examples as possible. But before we get to the TV and the fantasy architecture and all this goddamn salt, we have to set a baseline. Nikki.
And now, back to this bitch that had a lot to say about me the other day in the press. Miley, what's good?
Okay. In some ways, heavily regimented scrutiny seems a lot more polite than pulling apart someone's joints at 4 horsepower. Some would call such a society more enlightened, and a host of prison reformers would agree. Take French lawyer Antoine Gaspard Boucher-d'Argy, who in 1781 wrote, "On the side of power, it betrayed tyranny, excess, the thirst for revenge, and the cruel pleasure taken in punishing. On the side of the victim, reduced to despair, it was shameful." They found public executions too unsightly, too ungenteel, too cruel for enlightened society. Rather than destroy the criminal's body, they preferred to correct the soul of the convicted.
Borstal is a form of treatment, not imprisonment in the ordinary sense. So every boy has a job.
Creating penitent subjects who, in mind and body and spirit, will be transformed by the undeniable force of rigorous scheduling, I guess. Alone in his cell, the convict is handed over to himself. In the silence of his passions, he descends into his conscience. It is not, therefore, an external respect for the law or fear of punishment alone that will act upon the convict. but the workings of the conscience itself. Now, clearly Damian was guilty, but what's important here is the nature of the process and the nature of the punishment. In Damian's day, things like petty theft were all but ignored. Most peasants and subjects were beneath the radar of any king. But if a crime did arise to the attention of the courts, you could be tried for a crime completely unaware that you had ever been accused. Truth was established by a complex system of scheduled tortures and serial confessions, sometimes conducted by a single magistrate. And exemplifying the sovereign's grace, anyone can be pardoned for any crime. Exemplifying the sovereign's power, the executions were spectacular. Executions so magnificent that they in some ways acted as entertainment for the masses, and pardons so arbitrary, they acted in some ways as motivation for those same masses to riot. But later, after the revolution, and then the other revolution, and the other revolution, France was like a Jenga tower of governance. But in any case, sometime later, the power had moved away from the crown to the state, with a few adjustments. Firstly, punishment must seem to be natural and unarbitrary. Fines for thieves, poison for poisoners, murder by the death penalty, and so on. All very reasonable. Truth and innocence were established by a complex series of professionals and functionaries. A whole army of technicians took over from the executioner. Warders, doctors, chaplains, psychiatrists, psychologists, educationalists, all sing the praise that the law needs. They reassure that the body and pain are not the ultimate objects of its punitive action. And intellectuals newly emerged from the ivory tower weigh in to determine if your time would be better spent in an insane asylum. You know, the ancestral spectacle of crime scene investigations. Petty theft has come a long way. Previously, something that was more or less ignored by the courts has grown into a full-blown designation. Today, we have the kleptomaniac. And judging by our current obsession with genius murderers, the souls of criminals still seem to be of great public concern.
Stealing $300 every time you wanted to go use crystal meth. When you're an addict, you're a problem. You're an all-day, every-day, 24/7, all-consuming difficulty. You pummeled her. It's just like beating.
This transition from torture to punishment to Criminal Minds on your TV spread the power to punish across a number of institutions. But the power of those institutions quickly focused on a new set of targets. The workshop, the school, the army were subject to a whole micro-penality of time, latenesses, absences, interruptions of tasks, of activity, inattention, negligence, lack of zeal, of behavior, impoliteness, disobedience, of speech, idle chatter, insolence, of the body, incorrect attitudes, irregular gestures, of sexuality, impurity, indecency. Targets which would be stricken from a number of non-legal angles: laziness.
It seems like nobody wants to work these days.
Tardiness.
If you're gonna show up late for work.
The capacity to lie.
You came here to find out the results of a lie detector. We're going to give you the results, all right?
And so society stepped away from public executions. The hangman's scaffold was hidden behind prison walls. In Foucault's words, the publicity has shifted to the trial.
In divorce court, where real couples deal with real life.
And in the publicity of these trials, previously unremarkable questions take center stage. What will motivate such an act? Is this person criminally insane? And new forms of science are brought to bear upon the trials. Is this person clinically insane? The crime is condemned, of course, but far beyond the use of character witnesses, disciplinary society tries the soul of the convicted.
And I believe in every single person that comes into this courtroom. I know people can change.
And through the development of the Judge Show, what else do we see but an increasing focus onto the petty circumstances of small claims?
So you can't even stand up straight, you don't.
With constant with constant sidebars as to the kind of people set before the bench.
She took an opportunity. She thought I was Asian.
First
She thought I had money. She took advantage of me.
Yes, because he said he liked black women.
But despite the claims of rational enlightenment, Foucault claims that the point was not to punish less, but to punish better. If torture depended on the crude display of the sovereign's power, the new punishment is characterized by a subtler mode of control. Power must act while concealing itself. And discipline did work better. Replacing the scaffold with those irresistibly rational public trials, of course, disabled any scaffold-based resistance. Indeed, this institutional concern for reforming the soul was so useful that it exceeded the prison. One business manager delights in how the enforced silence of women's prison work boosted productivity far beyond that of the chatty, loose women working in the factories. The silent precision of the human machinery is reminiscent of the regulated rigor of the convent. Arranged in 2 rows, the prisoners are carrying out the task imposed on them. The strictest silence is constantly maintained. It seems that, in these halls, the very air breathes penitence. Compare this with the following. Go into a cotton mill, listen to the conversations of the workers and the whistling of the machines. Is there any contrast in the world more afflicting than the disorder of ideas and morals produced by the contact of so many men, women, and children? Amazon workers piss in bottles. And this new discipline exists concealed everywhere, in schools, hospitals, even televised courtrooms.
You are an example of why people should have to take tests before they're allowed to have children.
The major point here is that disciplinary society, while bringing a certain kind of reason onto a formerly arbitrary system of crime and punishment, also put up for debate a set of new things that were previously outside of the scope of the law. Consequently, these same psychic concerns re-enter the social world with a new institutional inflection.
She cusses like a sailor, she sits like a man, she burps and belches all out in public like a man.
All manner of social interactions now become open to an analysis that's almost medical. Every bad ex-boyfriend can now be accused of narcissism. Groups of young men become super predators, and grown men cry out into the depths of Twitter to ask if ordering dessert will betray their latent homosexuality.
I just don't think Brooke could have done this. Exercise gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. Happy people just don't shoot their husbands. They just don't.
And just as the law takes on its expert witnesses, bite mark analysts, and extols the exonerating power of endorphins, divorce court ties the knot by fully focusing on lifestyle infractions as a matter of legal import.
What's a man need jewelry for? What's on your finger? Yeah. A wedding ring. It means I have a wife.
So to conclude, disciplinary power here will be exemplified not simply by being in the courtly context of crime and punishment, but in the increasing focus on and the insertion of small lifestyle choices into that context. And that despite the absence of ankle bracelets or state violence, these morality plays, through their decaying legal coherence,
You must think this real court.
and intensifying social drama,
Don't come to me all boring. He only want to do missionary. I'm a big girl. I want to ride the wave sometimes myself.
exemplify the social side of what Foucault calls the carceral archipelago. The ideal point of penality today would be an indefinite discipline, an interrogation without end, an investigation that would be extended without limit to a meticulous and ever more analytical observation, a judgment that would at the same time be the constitution of a file that was never closed. Divorce court has been running since 1987.
Justice with Judge Maybelline will be life, because in everything we do, it involves the law.
In the previous videos, we mapped out the development of the tabloid television genre alongside the politics of late 20th century America. Specifically, how conveniently Bill Clinton's welfare policies aligned with the demonization of single mothers brought upon us by Maury Povich and Montel Williams. In the 2006 essay, Ruling Class, Disciplining Class, Race, and Ethnicity in Television Reality Court Shows, author Helene Shugart wants to assess whether, and if so, how the disciplinary principles and practices that Foucault identified as key to institutional control in the prison are apparent in the mainstream media, and that, because of its ostensible focus on the law, the judge show genre appears to offer several points of congruence with Foucault's discussion of the prison. So having established this baseline, the following videos will establish this in detail. We'll look at a few clips from court shows to see disciplinary power in action, often in ways that are legally irrelevant. And taking Sugart's cue, these disciplinary examples will take the form of spectacle,
I have been holding back, but now I am telling all. You hear me?
authority,
Now find a seat and keep quiet.
surveillance,
Why would she care if he were gay unless she wanted to sleep with him?
and docility.
Well, if you ask me, she's got herself one of them there psychological complexes. She ought to be seeing shrink.
We'll focus on one particular 1987 episode of Divorce Court, centering on advertising, attempted murder, and homosexual innuendo at a rodeo. Get ready to wallow.
Thanking you for joining us and reminding you, if you're involved in a dispute with another party, don't resort to taking the law into your own hands. You take them to court.